This is an R Media podcast.
This episode is made in partnership with Wounded Heroes Australia, the only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis service that helps veterans and their families in their hardest moments. This episode is supported by Vixin, Australian-made skincare powered by plant cell technology and designed to bring real simplicity back to skincare. Hey Rash, I've really been thinking about you today and I just wanted to call and let you know why. I've just had the most incredible chat with Hannah Richell. She's written a memoir, An Ocean in a Day, about her love for her husband Matt and how losing him completely shaped her. I'm going to send you a copy. And until you get it, just know I love you, I'm thinking of you, and I will speak to you very, very soon. When you were little, how many stories where a beautiful princess meets a handsome prince or some other fairy tale trope ended with that very well-worn phase and they all lived happily ever after? I feel like when we grow up, we think that this is what's going to happen when we find the one. Sure, it might not look as picture book perfect, but certainly we figure that if all goes to plan, we'll end up old and grey together with our beloved. So what happens when, on one completely ordinary day, that future is ripped out from underneath you with no warning at all? And there's no do-over, there's no coming back. Author Hannah Richell has lived this unimaginable journey. In 2014, her husband Matt went out for a morning surf, and that was something that was pretty common for the ocean-obsessed 41-year-old. But this time, he didn't come home. In the wreckage of an awful and unexpected accident that saw Hannah lose her husband and their 2 young children left without their dad, Hannah has traversed unimaginable grief. And now, she's finally ready to open up about that journey. Her latest book, An Ocean and a Day, is her love letter to Matt. It's a beautiful celebration of their relationship from its very earliest days until its bittersweet last. This memoir also retraces Hannah's resulting grief in all of its unexpected stages. It's raw, it's truthful, but also it's ultimately hopeful. And Hannah's here with us today to share her very personal story.
It felt like falling into a sinkhole. You know, you're sort of going along your life, feeling like you're doing everything right. You know, you're trying to be a good person, you're trying to be a kind person, you're trying to sort of be a loving parent and partner and friend. And then suddenly it's like everything is carrying on around you, but you've just dropped into this deep, dark hole. And you can kind of see everything going on up there, but you are stuck down in this pit and the light has gone and all the joy has gone.
I'm Tiffany Dunk from the Australian Women's Weekly, and this is Love Stories. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us here on Love Stories. We're really thrilled to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
I've been thinking about love and love stories, and I guess as an author and I'm assuming an avid reader, you must have read and possibly written your fair share. Have you got a favourite book about love or a favourite love story that you've read?
Gosh, that's such a good question. You put me on the spot right at the start. I mean, I do love reading love stories. I don't technically go for the kind of classic romance in my reading, but one of my favourite writers is Maggie O'Farrell, and her books I think encompass so many different forms of love. So both romantic love, but family love. And so I love the way she goes really deep into the themes. And so while she's not classified as a romantic writer, I would say, you know, most of us are always writing about love because that's sort of what it always boils down to in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your latest book is an absolute glorious tribute to love, and I'd love to delve into that if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you when you first met Matt and what your memories are of that time, your first impression of him?
Yeah, I love sharing this story. So I met Matt in 2001 in London. We were both living in London. He had just returned from a trip abroad backpacking. I was working for a publishing company, and I had my eyes on a promotion that was sort of dangled in front of me. And then Matt arrived in the office one day. He swept in and he'd been given the promotion as this new employee.
How dare he?
Yeah, I know.
That evil.
He was kind of sauntered in. He was wearing jeans. I think he was even wearing Birkenstocks, which was, proper salt in the wound. He just looked like he was very casual. And he started this job, and I was working sort of not beneath him, but sort of parallel in a slightly more junior role. And I was absolutely determined to hate him because, he'd taken my prize. And so that wasn't the most auspicious of beginnings for us. I gave him the cold shoulder. And publishing is a very female-dominated industry, which is wonderful. But when a new male specimen arrives in the office, they tend to cause a bit of a flutter. And he was young and attractive. And so I was even more determined not to give him my time. But it was just before September the 11th, 2001. And then that day rolled around and we all stood in the office watching as the World Trade Centers collapsed to the ground. And it felt like the world had just tilted on its axis. And all of my stubbornness and pride suddenly seemed ridiculous. And the day after that atrocity, Matt and I went and sat by a canal and drank coffee together. The office just felt too claustrophobic to be in. And we started talking, and I suddenly started to see beneath this very cool exterior of this very fascinating and handsome man. And I think that was when I first started to fall in love with him.
Wow. I was going to ask how quickly it went then from that to proper romance.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say within a couple of weeks, we had started to socialise with a group of friends from work. And we went one Sunday. It must have been about 2 weeks after that canal conversation. We went to a Sunday market in the East End, and I just felt that sort of electric connection with him. We were in a group, but I could sort of only really fixate on him, and I felt the same energy being reflected back at me. And by the end of the day, everyone else had dispersed, and it was just the two of us. And we sat in a bar and we had a drink, and then we kissed, and that was the start of it. And then really quickly we moved in together. There was a fair bit of dancing around each other at work, trying to pretend we weren't together, but it was pretty hard to hide.
It's always really obvious. I love it when there's a workplace romance. You can sniff it out from... Especially in media, I think, where you're trained to notice the small details.
Totally. And it's hilarious because I was always that person who's like, oh, workplace romance, how unprofessional. But of course, when you fall in love, you fall in love. You can't help it.
Yeah, you break all your own rules.
You do.
Then tell me about those sort of how that romance progressed from that first date, that first kiss, moving in together. What did life look like for you as a couple?
It was incredibly fun. We were young in London. We didn't have much money because we worked in publishing, which was badly paid, but we just sort of made the best of everything. We did lots of really fun things like ice skating at Somerset House, art galleries. We were going to book launches. We would just sit in pubs and, just chat. There was just felt like there was so much to discover about him. And I think that's one of the things I loved about Matt. He was incredibly well read and incredibly fascinating, but he also had this slightly kind of unknowable sense about him. So I was constantly kind of wanting to say, what are you thinking? What's going on? And I think that's one of the interesting things about being in a relationship is you have this deep connection, but you can never, ever truly know the full interior of somebody. And that's what keeps you interested.
So how long had you been together when you made the decision to move to Australia?
We talked about moving to Australia in that very first conversation.
Really?
Yeah, wow. Not together, obviously, but Matt had been backpacking in Australia and had fallen in love with the country. I had family over here and had also travelled and knew it was a place that I really wanted to go and live in. And so one of our very first conversations was how much we both loved Australia and how much we both wanted to return. So once we were in a relationship together, it became a sort of shall we do it? Should we do it? Let's do it. And so then it was a case of working out how to apply and, going through all the sort of red tape and restrictions and making sure that we could do it together.
Was there pressures that came with that as a couple?
For Matt, it was really hard because his mum had died when he was quite young. And so he would be leaving his dad and his brother, which I know weighed really heavily on him.
Yeah.
For me, it was more of an adventure because I had family in the UK, but also family in Australia. So it sort of felt like a win-win for me.
Yeah.
But I know for Matt, he felt pretty bad about, leaving his core support. And he also had a really wonderful bunch of friends from school who were a great support to him. So, it meant leaving that and starting all over again in a whole new city.
Yeah. Did that put pressure on you? Because I think sometimes, and I've spoken to people before who've moved countries and one person has less of a support, and it does put a little bit of pressure on the other partner to be all of those things. And, that can be a sticking point potentially.
To be honest, it felt the opposite. It felt like once we got on that plane, we were just kind of bonded in this experience.
Yeah.
And we became heavily reliant on each other because, we were setting up a whole new life in a whole new city. My family were in Melbourne, but we ended up settling in Sydney, which was where the work took us. And so really we were kind of on our own, building this new life together. And we used to joke, we got quite obsessed with an Australian TV show when we arrived called Love My Way, which we adored.
That show.
Oh,
yes.
So good. Because we didn't have a social life, we started joking that the characters were our friends. We'd be like, shall we sit with our friends tonight and do another episode? But that's how reliant we were on each other. We sort of became each other's world and then had to slowly expand that outwards as we made new contacts and new friends.
That must have been so beautiful. Like that sort of, it's almost like the giddiness of a first big love, like, when you're a teenager and it's sort of everything. That must have felt really exciting and special.
It was. And I think it was an exciting and special relationship.
Yeah.
I just kind of knew from the moment I met Matt that it felt different. It felt like we were at the right point in our lives. I describe it in my book as our right selves meeting at the right time. We were just... It was like we were supposed to be on this path together. And so it was pretty magical.
Did he sort of reflect those words back to you, or that kind of feeling back to you as well?
Yes, although we did have a sticking point in that before we left, I had been secretly hoping that he would drop to one knee and produce the ring and ask me to marry him. I thought it would be a great sort of finale moment to our time in England. And also nice to get married with friends and family before we left. But it was on our last sort of holiday in the summer before we left. And so I was sort of, every place we went to, I was thinking, maybe this is the place where he's going to propose. And he didn't, and he didn't. And then on our last night, I had a little bit too much to drink and got a bit sort of drunk and grumpy and explained why I was sort of feeling a bit grumpy. And he was really shocked because we hadn't really talked about marriage. And he said he didn't know if it was something that really mattered that deeply to him. He was committed to me, committed to making this amazing trip together. But kids and marriage weren't necessarily a path that he felt he was on.
Wow.
So that was quite a big moment for us to then have these conversations when we were already committed to moving to the other side of the world together.
Were kids and marriage really important to you?
They were getting increasingly important to me because I could see our peer group getting married and having babies. And I hadn't been thinking along those lines up until that point because I hadn't met the right person. But it felt like Matt was the right person. So it was jarring to suddenly realise that perhaps what I had been perceiving as our future was a little different to what Matt had been perceiving as our future. So there was probably a 24-hour period where we both sort of retreated and had to really think about what we were doing. But after those 24 hours, we just came back together and I just said, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this life with you. And he said, I choose you too. So that was sort of the biggest hiccup I think we faced in our relationship, as we were sort of getting together and planning this future together.
Yeah, well, I guess any relationship is continuing to choose somebody every day, isn't it?
So, absolutely. And I think that's sort of why he didn't want to get married at that point, because he was thinking, it doesn't mean that much. If we are actively choosing each other, it's a piece of paper. And I could also see that, there's part of me that didn't want to go through the whole rigmarole just for the sake of it. I knew it needed to mean something.
So you've continued to choose each other. You do have the wedding. At what point did kids come into the conversation?
Yes, Matt surprised me with a proposal while we were travelling through Australia, which came out of the blue. And we got married about a year later. And then very quickly I fell pregnant. And it's interesting because Matt had said he wasn't sure he was up to the job of being a parent. But just before we got married, we sat by the harbour in Sydney, near Vaucluse, and I can remember it distinctly. And we were watching some young parents with their little kids playing in the water, and Matt just turned to me and said, life would be pretty dull if it stayed just us. And I kind of turned to him shocked because it was another sort of 180 that he was doing. But I said, are you thinking about kids? And he said, yes. And so it was sort of opening the door to the whole idea of it, really. But as I say, very quickly, I got pregnant after we were married. And then we had our son. And then 2 years later, we had a daughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did parenthood change the relationship the two of you had?
Well, it made it much busier.
Yeah.
And certainly a little more stressful at times. But I think what's amazing about having kids with someone you love, as any parent will know, is watching your partner adapt and change and their heart expand to encompass the kids that you've then had together. It's a really beautiful thing. I mean, I adored watching Matt with the kids. It was really special. And he was a brilliant dad, like really present. He'd come home from work and make sure he had time to sort of play with them when it was bath time. He'd put them to bed. He'd read books. And yeah, he was a great dad. So all those fears he had, he didn't really need to have.
What did day-to-day look like for the two of you?
We had a tight-knit group of friends, which we had sort of built through becoming parents at this point. So we were in the inner west in Sydney. I'd met brilliant friends through my mother's group. Matt was working for a publishing company in Sydney. I had started writing, actually. That's when my writing career started. So when I got pregnant with my son, I started sort of drafting a novel and just thought, I wonder if I can make something of this. It had always been a secret dream. So for me, I was often taking myself off during the day to write. Matt would be going into the office. We were fortunate to have a beautiful childcare centre around the corner from where we lived, and then a little bit of part-time help from a childminder as well. So we were fortunate that we had some structures in place to allow us both to fulfill and pursue what we wanted to do as a career. But then at the end of the day, we'd come back, the kids would be home. We were in our sort of small cottage in the inner west, and it was just really lovely to sort of come back together and bond as a family. And weekends were beach trips and playing in the park and coffees in the local cafe and soccer and, all the things that a young family does.
Yeah.
And, it was hard. There were stresses and tantrums and, I don't want to paint it as this absolute rose-tinted sort of life that we were living, but it was pretty decent, and I think we were living that Sydney idyll, really.
And obviously Matt had a huge love for the ocean as well and had taken up surfing very enthusiastically.
He did.
Yeah. What was it about that drew him to the ocean and to that release, I guess?
So Matt was wonderful at being really present and in the moment. That was one of his sort of skills and one of the things I fell in love with him for, I think. He had just taken on a huge new job. He'd been made CEO of the company that he was working for, which was massive and daunting for him. He was thrilled to be given the opportunity, but it was a huge weight on his shoulders. And he loved being in the ocean. He just found such release in it, I think. It was a place where he could really focus on being in the moment and not sort of thinking about all the other stresses that life might hold. And so surfing for him was a release, I think, and he would take himself off early morning, sometimes when it was cold or pretty miserable outside, and I'd be like, do you have to go? And he just loved it so much. I think running and surfing for him were a way of coping with the pressures of life. And so, occasionally I'd resent it, but generally I saw how much he needed it and what it gave him. And, you don't ever want to deprive someone of the thing that brings them such joy.
Coming up, we're going to talk some more with Hannah and the ways in which grief shaped her and those around her. Confession time, guys. I'm really lazy when it comes to my skincare routine. To be honest, I'm lucky if I remember to wash my face at night and don't even go into applying all those different steps of toners, serums, creams, all the different things. It's why Vixin's all-in-one moisturiser was such a game changer for me when I came across it last year. Just one step, done. But I found a new secret weapon and it's become just as easy to add into my lazy girl routine. Vixin's Shake to Activate Super Vita Serum is lightweight, it smells divine, and it's really good for hydration. And I've got super dry skin, so that's been really great for me. All you need to do is just shake the bottle, apply a couple of drops to your face, and then whack on that moisturiser. And literally, what could be simpler than that? I'll let you in on another secret. If you go to vixin.com.au to purchase now, just add in the code LOVESTORIES, that's Love Stories, all one word, at checkout, and you'll get an extra 30% off. You're welcome. You write about this in An Ocean in a Day, and, there was a morning in 2014 where Matt went and he did his regular surfing morning surf. Can you tell me as much as you're comfortable telling me about that day and your memories of it?
Sure. So it was a really ordinary Wednesday in July 2014. It was the school holidays, so our son was home. He was going to a soccer camp that morning. Matt wasn't long back from a 2-week business trip in the UK, which had been pretty high pressure. And he woke up that morning and just decided he was going to do things a little bit differently. So instead of racing off to the office, he said, Han, I'm going to take some time this morning. I'm going to take Jude to soccer camp. I'm going to spend some time with our daughter. I would like to have a coffee with you. And then I'm going to go and work in a cafe myself. I'm going to focus on this business strategy that I've got to do. And then I'm going to go and meet our IP lawyer down at the beach, and we're going to have what the two of them were calling a board meeting, which was technically surfing out in the waves, talking shop, but doing it in the water rather than in some fancy restaurant, which, I fully supported. So we had these beautiful, unusual moments in our morning, and then I went off to my studio to write. I was writing my third novel at the time. Matt went off, and it was about lunchtime, and my phone started ringing with a number that I didn't recognise. I ignored it to start off with because I didn't want the distraction. And then my mother guilt kicked in, and I thought, it could be about the kids. I better answer this. So I did, and it was Matt's PA from work saying that she'd had a phone call from a Bondi detective who wanted our home address. And she couldn't get hold of Matt, so she called me because she felt pretty uncomfortable giving out our personal details to someone over the phone, particularly without Matt's consent. So we had this conversation and we both agreed it was pretty strange. And in my head, I was thinking detective. I was a writer, so I was like, does she mean like a private investigator? And then I suddenly realised she meant the police. So I thought there was just a feeling in me rising up, and I thought, I need to go home. There's something not right with the day. I need to go home. So I packed up my studio and I sort of half ran, half walked up the hill back to our cottage. And on the way, I phoned our childminder and I said, strange question, but has anybody come to the house? And she sounded different too. She said, yes, there are 2 people here. And I said, are they police? And she said, yes. And so I said, I'm coming. And I pretty much ran the rest of the way to our front door. And our cottage is very small. We had a glass panel in our front door and bifolds at the back, and the light always flooded through from the back through to the front. But that day I can still remember as I put my key to the door, the house looked really dark. There were 2 people I could see standing in the front room, just sort of beyond the front door. And I knew if I opened that door, I was going to be walking across a threshold into something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something bad was in the house. But my kids were in the house.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I knew I had to go in. So I opened the door and there were two plainclothes police detectives standing there. One of them, I'm pretty sure, looked like she had tears in her eyes. And they asked me, "Are you Hannah Richell?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We're really sorry to tell you Matt's had an accident down at Tamarama Beach." And I, in my head, was thinking, oh my goodness, I need to go to the hospital. I need to be with him. And I said, "Is he okay?" And they said, "No, I'm so sorry to tell you he died." And that was the moment my life changed.
Oh my God. Who did you have? Did you have anyone with you? Like what?
No. So I had our beautiful nanny, Simone. She was in the house with the kids. But obviously she was keeping the kids as much as she could at bay from what was unfolding in our front room. I was with the police for a little while they explained to me that there had been media very quickly down at the beach.
Yeah.
I mean, Tamarama Beach, as I'm sure you know, is hugely popular, very public, iconic Sydney beach.
Yeah.
So as soon as the word goes out that something terrible has happened down there, naturally the media will flock to kind of find out what's going on. So they explained that it would be on the news very soon and I needed to make some phone calls to people that needed to know that Matt was dead. And in my mind, I was just in complete bewilderment and shock. I couldn't understand the words coming out of their mouth. It was like they were speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
But there was this incredible pressure on my shoulders to do something. And so with shaking hands, I had to sort of look through my mobile phone and very quickly think, who do I need to tell?
Oh God.
And what am I going to tell them?
Yeah.
And I was just overcome with this horrendous sense of shame. It was the weirdest feeling.
Why do you think that is?
I've questioned this so much now. Why would I feel embarrassed or ashamed that this awful accident had happened through no one's fault?
No.
And I can only think now that it was the sudden wrongness that our life felt like it had swerved into. It was almost like I was questioning from the very get-go, what did we do wrong? Was it some kind of karmic experience we were going through? Had we been too happy, too lucky, too in love? Did we deserve this somehow? And I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but that was one of the very first grief feelings that I had, which I'd never heard anyone talk about before.
No.
But, it was shock, obviously, the shock and the profound despair that suddenly was overwhelming me. And so I made those 5 phone calls to people, found the words. And then one of those calls was to my sister in Melbourne. And I said, Matt's died and I don't know what to do. And she said, don't do anything. I'm coming.
Oh my God.
And I mean, thank God for my sister. She got on a plane as quickly as she could and she was there that evening.
Yeah. I can only imagine that whole day, night, that immediate following period must have just felt like something, I don't know, like what did it feel like actually? I'm trying to put it into words, but in yours, what did that?
I mean, as a writer, I've been trying to find the words, and I think it felt like falling into a sinkhole. You're sort of going along your life, feeling like you're doing everything right. You're trying to be a good person. You're trying to be a kind person. You're trying to sort of be a loving parent and partner and friend. And then suddenly it's like everything is carrying on around you, but you've just dropped into this deep, dark hole. And you can kind of see everything going on up there, but you are stuck down in this pit and the light has gone and all the joy has gone and you don't know what to do. And it's just despair and sadness and sorrow and pain and rage and shame and, so many, more than 5 stages of grief. It's a whole muddle and mess of emotion.
Yeah.
And I felt myself getting really brittle, really hard. I describe it in my book as being in a sort of dark chrysalis where it just feels like you want to enclose yourself and hold yourself and retreat.
Yeah.
And, just for nothing to be real. But of course it is real. And I had 2 kids that I needed to be real and present for.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You are now a parent and you're doing it on your own as well, which is something obviously you don't plan for. How did you approach that with the kids?
It was bewildering to begin with. I mean, I was in a whole new terrain. I didn't know how to cope and what was the right thing to do. My gut instinct told me on that very first day that I didn't want to tell the kids that Matt had died that day. I was in no state to tell them. And so my sister and I decided that I would tell them the next morning. I wanted to give them one night where they went to bed thinking that the family was still intact. And so I woke up the next morning and knew what I had to do. And it's probably the worst moment of my life.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, I don't know why I'm...
No, it's lovely that you are.
Thank you for sharing all of this story with us. And
no, it's, I'm happy to share it because I believe these are conversations we should be having about grief and death and how we find our way through these terrible things that can happen to us in life.
Yeah.
I had a beautiful friend who arranged for a child psychologist to come to the house.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And she sat with me and she explained so many things, really helpful things that were, in hindsight, a complete game changer and lifesaver for me dealing with the kids. So one of the things she told me was that kids experience grief. They experience all the same feelings that we do as adults. But kids are so present. They're so wonderful at being in the moment. So they can jump in and out of their emotions, like jumping through puddles. And that was helpful because, when my kids were screaming with laughter one minute and then desolate and sad the next, I could kind of piece things together and understand what was happening for them in their little bodies. And she explained that routine and structure would be incredibly important for them as we went through this seismic change in our family. And so while it was agony to get up in the morning and take them to school and take them to daycare and, try and keep to the sort of format of our life as much as we could, I think it was helpful because we all needed something to pin ourselves to.
Well, that's what I was wondering, like in having to pick yourself up and having to do all of these things, did it almost help you a little bit in your...
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I needed the kids and their structure and their love as much as they needed me to be the mum that they needed and the structure that I could put in place for them. We helped each other as much, they helped me. Their responses and their own maturity levels were empathic and kind and generous to me in return. And I think we were all just looking for the love and comfort that we could give each other. And it was agony to sit at the end of the day and read books to them in the way that Matt and I had always done. But we found books about life and love and loss, and we read those together. And I think those moments of sitting huddled together, reading about, the experience of being a human being and the sad things that can happen as well as the happy things, it was helpful to me as much as to them. Kids' books with their plain and simple language were probably helping my neural pathways as much as theirs.
Yeah, because as you said, it's so hard to take in when something that huge hits you. You can't take it all in at once. Your brain, it's too big for anyone's brain to take in. So having those sort of very simple...
Totally. I think it was like we were remapping the world, both in our hearts and our brains and trying to understand the world without Matt in it anymore as much as we could.
Yeah.
And so there were lots of things that we did together. We had a memory jar that we would write on scraps of paper.
Yes.
Memories of Matt that I was terrified as their mother that they were going to lose, because my daughter was 3 and my son was 6.
Wow,
and I knew
so
that,
little.
as the kids were growing up, they may not remember their father, certainly not as clearly as I would wish them to.
Mm-hmm.
So finding ways to honour and remember Matt, to talk about him, to make him feel as present as possible were important, particularly in those early days. And finding ways to talk about our feelings was really important. Another piece of advice the psychologist gave me was kids can't find the words sometimes, and emotions can be so overwhelming. So she suggested we colour code feelings and have, let the kids decide what colours meant what feelings to them. And then if they were having an overwhelming experience and they couldn't put words to it, I could say, what colour are you feeling? And they could point to the colour. Same with drawing pictures was a real release for them. I was finding release in words, but they were finding release in drawing pictures of Dad and the cat, and, anything that just brought them a sense of home and comfort, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a short break now, and then afterwards Hannah is going to open up about what her life looks like these days. Hey guys, I want to throw a few numbers at you. The first one is 1 in 20. That's how many households in Australia have at least one person who has served our country. And chances are that could be your sister, your dad, your housemate, your neighbour, your partner, your friend. It could be you. And for many of those who have served, that service has had a long-lasting impact. Because the next number I have for you is 3. In 2023, 3 veterans died every 2 weeks by suicide. And that is a leading cause of death for ex-serving ADF members. I've got one more number, 1,555. That's how many Australian veterans were homeless on any given night during the 2021 census. So why am I telling you all of this? It's because you can do something to help put an end to these devastating numbers. Wounded Heroes Australia is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis service that's there any time of the day and night to answer the calls of veterans and their families in crisis and offer them an immediate lifeline. But they need your help to keep this going. Whether it's as little as $1 or even more, every donation from you can help to save the life of a veteran who dedicated theirs to protecting ours. Head to woundedheroes.org.au to make a real difference. Thank you. Once those sort of overwhelming first days and I guess all of the planning that you have to do around it, death comes with a whole heap of admin that you don't expect and no one prepares you for.
No.
That must have kept you busy in some ways. How did you sort of navigate when that initial start of grief had passed and the initial start of life after Matt had started, and how did you navigate the months that followed that?
So you're right, there's so much to do in the initial stages. It feels like someone's, press fast forward and they're forcing you to make so many decisions.
Yeah.
A friend called it Sadmin that you're doing, and
Sadmin.
and it
That's
is like
actually
that.
a great term.
It was relentless to begin with, and then that all dies down. You do the funeral. We had a beautiful memorial for Matt, and then you're kind of left in this wasteland of piecing things back together. And I don't know how I navigated it, if I'm completely honest. It was purely a case of getting up every morning, waking up with that awful sickening lurch of Matt's not beside me in the bed. I need to do another day of this. We need to get through this. Here we go. It's literally one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And you cling to the anchors that sort of tether you to a feeling of life, really. That's what I found anyway in my experience. I needed things that reminded me of life and love, and that could be anything from spending time with my kids, hanging out with a friend and just sitting, having a coffee and having a big cry, going for a walk and just finding something lovely to look at, you know, on the walk, whether it was as simple as a leaf or the light on the water or a swallow in the sky, which swallows always reminded me of Matt. It was just finding something tiny to anchor to and cling to get through the day. And I think grief in those early stages it's so punishing, but you are getting through and just trying to put one foot in front of the other. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah. Obviously, you go into a long line of firsts.
The first Father's Day came around really quickly. So Matt died in July. Father's Day in Australia is September. So that was one of the firsts. That was hard. My daughter turned 4 about 4 weeks after Matt died. We had to do a birthday party, which I'd already started planning before Matt died. That was very hard. I think those firsts, they're hard, but I actually think, you know, we got to the anniversary day and I went to the beach that morning, watched the sunrise with my friend Adam, and it kind of passed. But then you're left with, okay, we've done all the firsts. Now we've got to do another year.
Yeah, wow.
And then we do another year and another year. And so actually the firsts give you a weird framework, but then they fade away and you're still left with piecing life back together.
Yeah.
So I would almost say that grief gets a little harder after the first year. I mean, not harder, just different hard, maybe.
I think people I've spoken to as well who have lost someone important in their lives, you know, people are fantastic in those early days. You know, everyone wants to help, everyone wants to be there, but then gradually their life goes back to normal and that presentness falls away. Did you find that?
I did, and I felt a sense of frustration. Perhaps I imagined it. I had wonderful friends that stuck with me, but you sort of feel like the world's clamoring for you to put your pain to one side. You know, they kind of want you to make them feel comfortable. They want to know that you're okay. And I wasn't okay for a really long time. And I couldn't say that I was okay. But you feel this immense pressure to be progressing through grief, to be ticking off the stages. And, you know, people talk of acceptance as this final stage. And so I was sort of thinking, okay, when am I going to get to accept this? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And when am I going to be done with feeling this awful?
Yeah.
But it doesn't kind of work like that. You know, you carry it.
Yeah.
And I still carry it. I carry it differently, but I do still carry it. So you do feel this pressure. And there will be people in grief that can stand beside you, that can accompany you and can be incredibly wonderful. Try not to fix things, but just allow you to be what you need to be in the moment. And there will be other people who cannot do that. And I accept that now. I actually have great empathy now for people who are trying to accompany someone in grief because it's incredibly hard. I think it's one of the hardest things to do as a human being is to see someone else suffering, and it's scary, right? We're all terrified of somehow making it worse.
Yeah.
And I don't think, from my experience, there's much that anyone can do to make it worse. Saying someone's name, you know, saying the deceased's name, sharing memories is a beautiful thing to do for someone who's lost someone they love.
I think so many people are frightened to bring that person up, but actually when you're really missing somebody,
it's all you're thinking about
so
anyway.
Nice to be able to talk about them. Yes, please, can we talk about them?
Yes. I mean, it's not like they're not in your head.
No.
So actually I found it a great comfort when someone wanted to share a brief fragment of the Matt that they knew, or you know, it brings the joy back to remember the person that you love and miss.
Yes.
So actually it's incredibly helpful.
Is there anything else, I guess, any other nuggets of wisdom, rituals, anything else that helped you or you found helpful during even today, because as you said, you still carry the loss with you. Are there things that you found helpful that you can share?
There are. So I'm a writer and I read a lot. And for me, I couldn't write when Matt first died. I had been writing a novel at the time, and there was no way I could open up my laptop and go back to that book straight after he died. It felt like a betrayal of sorts to even think about doing that. And even if I had been able to, my brain was in a whole different headspace. It was like it had shattered and I needed to piece it back together. So following a train of thought, which you need to plot fiction, to come up with imaginative characters, it was beyond me. But what I did eventually find was great comfort in reading other people's experiences of love and loss. I hadn't ever really, I'd read some memoir, but I hadn't ever dived into memoir or poetry particularly. And suddenly I was rabidly hungry to have other people's experiences, which would chime in some way and make me feel less abnormal. Immersing myself in other people's words and experiences of loss. You might think that would sound really weird and actually depressing and morbid, but actually it made me feel less weird to understand that what I was going through was all part of the human experience, really. And if we're lucky to be here long enough to live long lives and to love beautiful people, then unfortunately, I know I've learnt that, loss might be part of that, and we might have to face that one day.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can prepare for it exactly, but I think it helps you live with more intention and more presence to understand that everything is so fragile and that all it takes is a wave, or a diagnosis or, a car accident. And, we're all pretty fragile as human beings, and we're able weirdly to walk through the world not feeling that most of the time.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's really helpful to sometimes remember, because it does make you pull those small, quite ordinary moments of your day into focus and brings a new sense of appreciation for it all.
Yeah. Well, you've obviously, in reading others' words and living your own experience, you've put those words into use in your memoir, An Ocean and a Day, which I've absolutely devoured. And I think it's filled with takeaways that anyone can, because I think everyone will face loss at some point in their life. It might come later for some, it might come early for others. But I think, there is so much in there that will help someone in any stage of that process. What do you really hope that people take out of your memoir and your beautiful love letter to Matt?
Oh, thank you. I hope, the reason for sharing it, I looked back at a lot of the writing I'd done after the first 2 years when Matt had died. And as I think I said it earlier, it was never my intention to write a memoir. I was writing for release. It was kind of almost an act of survival, just to get my feelings out of my body. But when I looked back, I could start to see that there was some kind of transformation in the way I was carrying my grief. And one of the questions I had been preoccupied with when I was really, really in the early days was, how long am I going to feel like this?
Yeah.
How long is it going to feel this awful to be me? And I don't know if I can give anyone else that answer, because grief is so personal. But I hope the memoir, which kind of extends out, it carries a lot of that early raw grief, but it does then extend out over 10 years. I hope it shows the transformation in me, that as I move back towards life and love and light and hope. And so the book, in a way, I see it as perhaps a kind of small companion to somebody who's going through something really hard, or a little light that someone might need in a time of darkness. And if you're not going through that, then perhaps it's just a book that might encourage you to pull your family and friends a little closer, or look at those moments in your days and just have a greater sense of appreciation for when it's really calm and ordinary. We can get so caught up in the future and what's next, but actually those days that we live when everything's just steady, there's a lot to be appreciated in that.
That's beautiful. You talked about moving towards hope. Can you recall the first moment that you started to feel, okay, I feel hopeful again, or not I can see a light at the end of the tunnel, because that tunnel goes forever, but when were you starting to feel hopeful, or when were you starting to see there's life beyond this for me?
I think I saw it very, very quickly. Like,
that's great.
I didn't change my life. I mean, I wasn't sort of radically transformed quickly, but I think I knew, even at my daughter's birthday party, watching the little kids playing in the courtyard and seeing the plants that Matt and I had just only recently planted in the garden, like thriving, I just had this little feeling like Matt's died, but there is still life here. So that was incredibly early, but then it sort of disappears and you're overwhelmed again with the sort of darkness that consumes you. But there were little shards all the way along that kind of would suddenly remind me that this doesn't have to define you. You didn't die, and there is still life out there when you're ready for it. But I would say, really, I felt my life feeling more steady and lighter after, I mean, it's awful to put a timeline on it. It was such a kind of progression, but probably after about 5 years, there's a passage that I write in the memoir where I can see very clearly that I am grounded. I'm understanding that this is a path I'm walking, and I can look back and see where I've been, but I can also see the hope of walking forwards.
You talked about all the different stages of grief that you went to. Obviously, there's the classic 5, but then the other ones that came in. Was there a sense of guilt, a little, that came along with that idea of moving on or moving forward?
100%. Yeah. I think guilt's a part of grief. Guilt that you're still alive. Guilt that you get to be doing all these things when the person you love isn't. And yeah, there's a lot of guilt and a lot of questioning yourself. What's appropriate for me here? I was 39 when Matt died, so relatively young widow. Is it appropriate for me to go and sit in a bar with my girlfriends, to wear lipstick and have a glass of Prosecco? And, I did do that one night, and awkwardly, one of my husband's colleagues walked in, and I was sort of caught mid-laugh and instantly felt that shame come rushing back of, is this appropriate for me to be, I'm a grieving widow. Should I be out having a drink with girlfriends? Is this right? What do I wear? I mean, it's crazy. It was all in my head. I don't think anyone was really thinking about me and judging me, but you judge yourself. There is guilt, and guilt then to want to sort of start questioning where my life might go next. Absolutely, that was something I had to reckon with.
In terms of dating again as well, you mentioned at the end of the memoir that you have met somebody else. Like, at what point did you feel ready to even contemplate that?
So I dabbled with dating, I think it was probably about 2 years after Matt had died. I knew I was still quite young, and I spoke about it with a counsellor actually, and I said, I'm really confused. I'm having all these feelings like Matt died, but I didn't die, and I still feel like there might be something out there for me. I was kind of craving intimacy, and we talked about my guilt around that, and she said, well, who wouldn't want to feel something other than what you're feeling? I think it's really normal. And so I tried some dating apps with varying success. It was way too early. And I think what that early experience taught me was that really what I was craving was intimacy with Matt, not with just anyone. But I did meet someone. So 5, 6 years after Matt died, I went on a date, and I met someone in a pub for lunch, and I walked in and I saw him sitting at a table, and I just thought, hello. And we had a really wonderful sort of hour or two together just chatting, and I told him everything that had happened, and he told me his life experience, and we sat there and we kind of cried together. And part of me thought, well, he's going to do a runner because that's a lot. But, you know, he's a beautiful man, and he kind of met me in that really messy, broken space. And we've entered a relationship with our eyes wide open. And actually, it's been a really wonderful relationship where he has 3 kids and I have 2 kids. And we've become this slightly chaotic blended family, which, you know, if you said to me years back, this is where your life will be and what it will look like, I would have never have guessed, but here I am.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think, do you still find ways to honour Matt within that relationship? Because it must be hard for someone when you've had this great love and it ended not because they did something wrong or you broke up, but through absolutely no fault. Like, how do you navigate that together as a couple?
Well, I think it takes a really empathic and special person to be able to understand everything that I had lived and loved before and take that on board and then step forward into the future with me. And so I'm incredibly lucky that I have found someone who sees all of that, accepts all of that, and, you know, still loves me and my kids and embraces it. And yeah, so we do find ways to ensure that Matt's present. I light a candle every Christmas day for Matt, and it sort of burns all day. We talk about Matt. We celebrate Matt's birthday. I have photos around the house of the kids' dad, and, you know, they're there. It's just really important, I think, that he's part of our lives as we move forwards, and, you know, we try to honour him as best we can. And, you know, I often take private moments. I have a dog now, and I, you know, go out in the fields walking him, and I think most days I'm thinking, you know, I cast a little thought up to the sky, which I don't know why the sky, but somehow that feels appropriate, and, you know, say my little hello to Matt. And it's less pain these days, and it's more a sense of gratitude. It's a sense of love and just being grateful for the life that we shared, the kids that I have now in my life, and yeah, just, you know, trying to embrace the whole mess of it, really.
Yeah, because how are the kids these days? What are they up to?
They're good, yes. So my daughter's 15, my son's 18. They've just both done big sets of exams.
Wow.
And they're good. They're pretty steady. I mean, it's hard. And my grief tends to manifest now more as real sadness for them in those key moments of their life when I know that their dad would be so immensely proud, or I feel that they would really benefit from him being there to put his big arms around them. And so it's painful, and I know they carry their grief and their sadness, but they're doing okay, you know, and they're incredibly empathic, warm-hearted kids and resilient. And so I'm proud of them, and how they're doing, you know, it's really a question for them. They're young adults now. So, you know, I'd love to throw that back at them, but they're not here.
You can ask them when you get home.
Yeah.
If you could go back today, Hannah could go back and tell Hannah in that moment on that worst day of your life something, what would you tell her?
It's funny. I would say something that I felt 24 hours after Matt died, and I sat in a park in the sunshine with the man who'd been with Matt when he died, explaining to me what had happened.
Oh, God.
And I had this very strange sense that somehow Matt was with us. And I can't explain it. It was probably shock. But we were sitting in this park under the blue sky, and I felt like Matt was somehow there, and I heard somebody or something chimed in my head, and it just said, "It's okay." And so I would probably just repeat that to her. I'd say, it's going to be okay. It's hard. It's a really long road, and I'm still walking it, you know. Grief doesn't leave you, but neither does love. And that's the hope of it, right? So, yeah, I would look back and say, it's going to be okay.
That's beautiful. If you could manifest love for yourself and for the kids as you go forward from this point on, what do you hope love looks like in your life?
Oh, I just hope it's big and generous and messy, and I hope there's not too much pain attached to it, because obviously I've learnt that life is this crazy. There's a line of poetry I love, which is, everything is beautiful and I am so sad. And that's how the heart makes a duet of wonder and grief. And I think that sums it up for me, really. I know that there is wonder. I know there's grief. But I just, I want to experience it all because, that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for these tears because I feel like, no, don't be sorry. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Is anybody else in tears right now or on the verge of them, or is that just me? That was such a beautiful love story that Hannah and Matt had, and I'm so impressed with how incredibly Hannah was at opening up and sharing how the loss of him has shaped both her and her family. I really think there's so much to take away from this conversation, whether you're the one who's currently experiencing some form of grief or you know somebody who is. And for me, I know this is going to make me think about those small everyday moments with the people that I love and hold them just that little bit tighter. If you haven't already read An Ocean in a Day, I really encourage you to. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. We'll put some links on where to buy it in the show notes. And if this has triggered anything for you, please know there's support available. You can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14, and we've got a full list of support services in the show notes that you can go out and find too. You've been listening to me, Tiffany Dunk, from the Australian Women's Weekly. And we're going to be back next week with another story of love. I hope to see you then. This episode is made in partnership with Wounded Heroes Australia, the only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis service that helps veterans and their families in their hardest moments. This episode is supported by Vixin, Australian-made skincare powered by plant cell technology and designed to bring real simplicity back to skincare. Love has never been one size fits all, and these are the stories we love to tell at the Australian Women's Weekly. For over 90 years, we've been bringing you stories of hope, of heart and connection that reflect the world we live in. And now it's time for a new chapter with the Australian Women's Weekly Love Stories podcast.
This is an R Media podcast.